work on that. Good evening, everyone. We'll begin in just a couple of minutes. Okay, perfect. It's live streaming now on. Yeah, still have people joining in. Just give it a minute. Okay. 7:01, so let's get started. All right. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Ravina Nimbalkar, and I'm the Executive Director at NAMI Santa Clara County. Before we begin with the presentation for tonight, I'm just going to go over some of the updates at NAMI Santa Clara County. Our helpline is up and running from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday via phone and email. And we also have after-hour family support available on evenings and weekends. Our office hours for walk-in for the helpline is 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Our support groups are all listed on our website. Our website is namisantaclara.org and offered both some over Zoom as well as in person. So you can get all the information on the website to see, whatever suits you. Our educational classes such as family to family, familiar to familiar, persona to persona, peer to peer, provider education. You can call a helpline number 408-453-0400 and select option 1 to get further details as well as to get on the wait list, the interest list. The NAMI Basics is on demand and on our website, and you can always take it on at your own pace. And so is NAMI Homefront. Do keep an eye out for the next FaithNet MH101. We just had one in May, and we'll be announcing some new dates in the future as well. Our community peer program continues to match via hospitals as well as self-referrals. And to get more information, or if you're interested in the community peer program, all the information is listed on our website. And there is also a form that you can fill in if you're interested in participating in the program. NAMI Walk Silicon Valley is going to be on October 4th. It's going to be at the same location as we're doing the last few years at the History Park, and we're really excited about it. This past weekend, we had our annual picnic, and we had an amazing participation. Over 250 people had RSVP, and I can easily say I think there were about 200 people who showed up. So I'm really glad that everyone's coming out and meeting and getting back into the whole NAMI vibe. We're going to have our the NAMI Walks kickoff, which is going to take place on July 19th at our office. It's a Saturday, and we'll be sending out information about it soon. So in just about a month and 10 days. Before I introduce the speaker, I want to inform all of you that we are proposing 2 changes to the NAMI Santa Clara County's bylaws, and we are seeking the community's approval for this. The first change is in the general meeting. We are proposing reducing the number of general meetings that are held each year. Every year we used to have 9, and now we are condensing them down to 5. We'll still ensure that meetings are very meaningful, well attended, and aligned with our strategic goals, as well as we invite amazing speakers just like tonight for every general meeting. And the second bylaw change is the board officer voting. Starting next year, we propose to move to a secure online voting system for elected board officers. This change will improve accessibility, transparency, and participation from our membership. And so earlier we used to have it announced at the general meeting, but I think now we're going to move it to an online version. So these proposed changes will help us serve better with our mission and adapt to how our members prefer to engage. I'm happy to answer any questions, but if you approve of the changes to the bylaws that we are proposing, I would request if you can just raise your hands, and then I can just take a count. And so you can start raising your hands now. Okay, I see some hands raising. That's great. I have need some more hands to be raised for us to proceed further if you approve of those changes. Anyone else? Okay, I think we have a majority of people who raised their hands. So thank you so much. And we are going to go ahead with these proposed changes. So really appreciate it. Um, okay, moving forward, our speaker for tonight is Dr. Maureen O'Connor. And Dr. O'Connor will be exploring the current state of California's mental and behavioral health workforce, highlighting both challenges and opportunities. Her talk will focus on distinct roles and scopes of practice of five major licensed providers in California: psychiatrists, psychologists, marriage and family therapists, licensed professional clinical counselors, and licensed clinical social workers. Dr. O'Connor is a PhD, JD is the president of Palo Alto University, which specializes in psychology and counseling. Prior to joining the Palo Alto University, Dr. O'Connor held multiple roles at the City University in New York over a period of 18 years, and completed her PhD and JD in a dual degree program in psychology, law, and policy at the University of Arizona prior to launching her academic career. Recent work has focused on evidence-based, I don't know how to say this, how do you say that? Pedagogy?
Pedagogy.
Pedagogy, sorry, a development of doctoral students and innovative mentoring strategies. Her book, Teaching Psychology: An Evidence-Based Approach, with co-authors Dr. Jill Gross Pfeiffer and Patricia Brooks, was published in 2019. Over to you, Dr. O'Connor. And I just want to mention that feel free to either raise your hands or put questions in the chat or Q&A section. Dr. O'Connor mentioned that she loves the interaction, so you can also raise your hands and I can enable the speaking ability. Over to you now.
Thank you so much, Ravina. Really delighted to be here. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm a longtime NAMI member and a beneficiary of its support over the many years, and I'm honored to talk with you all this evening. As Ravina said, for the last 9 years, I've served as the president of what I consider our local gem up in the Arastadera Hills and now in downtown Mountain View, Palo Alto University. Our mission statement, which I think is highly relevant to our discussion this evening, it reads as follows: through education, research, training, and service in mental and behavioral health, PAU prepares its students to address pressing and emerging issues that equitably meet the needs of our ever-changing human condition. This accurately conveys that every one of our nearly 1,100 students is studying in the fields of psychology, mental health counseling, and starting this fall, we're so excited, our clinical social work program. We have 3 doctoral programs at PAU. We offer a PhD, doctoral degree in clinical psychology, a PsyD, doctoral degree in clinical psychology, and a PhD in counselor education and supervision. And we offer 3 master's programs: an MS, a master's in psychology, which is not a clinical degree, just for background in the field of psychology. Wonderful program, online program. An MA in mental health counseling with 2 tracks, marriage and family therapy track, and licensed clinical professional counselor track. And as I said, starting in the fall, an MSW in social work. We also offer a small but excellent +2 undergraduate program. What that means is that we offer essentially the junior and senior year of an undergraduate degree for those who are coming out of community colleges or coming back or retraining or wanting to change their careers. We essentially offer a psychology major in those last 2 years of college. So I could talk about PAU all night, and I'm happy to answer questions. But what I would really like to talk to you about this evening is how universities contribute to supporting the mental and behavioral health needs of the community, not just through our graduates and the people that we put into the field, but in other ways as well. And because of all of our concern about the behavioral health workforce shortages that we are well aware we are experiencing, I want to focus especially on the 5 major behavioral health licensable degrees that are offered locally. I think it's really helpful for everybody to sort of have a better understanding of what is possible in terms of both from a studying standpoint, but also as family members and others in the community, what people are trained, how they're trained, and how you should approach working with these different professionals. Yeah, so as I said, you all, as well as the rest of us, are well aware of the provider shortages facing our communities and our families. According to the American Psychological Association, almost 60% of psychologists say they have no openings for new patients. More than 2/3 of psychologists, almost 70%, maintain a wait list and report that the average wait is up to at least 3 months for a first appointment. 31% say their average wait time is more than 3 months. Psychologists also report increasing demand for certain types of mental health condition treatment, and particularly for anxiety disorders, about 68%, and trauma and stressor related disorders. And according to the American Counseling Association, counselors are absolutely overwhelmed with high caseloads, and many are leaving the field in search because of the high demand and concerns around work-life balance. A 2022 study by the American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy found that most graduates in that field are at full employment. I always say to people when they ask me about our alums, I do not have any issue saying that our alums have no difficulty finding positions. There is such a need. At the national level, as of their data is always a bit behind, but as of March of 23, 160 million Americans lived in a designated mental health professional shortage area. And according to Kaiser, 47% of the US population lives in a mental health workforce shortage area. Some states require up to 700 additional practitioners before they could remove that designation of being considered a shortage area. Now, in California, there is a severe shortage of mental health providers, as you all are well aware. Over 6.5 million people in California live in areas with too few mental health professionals. 633 areas in California are officially designated mental health shortage zones. And of course, rural and underserved communities are the hardest hit by these shortages. More providers are urgently needed to meet the demand. So examples of the effects of this impact, as you all, I'm sure, well aware, Santa Clara County declared a mental health crisis, and because of the difficulty to fill openings for mental health workers. San Diego County has said that it needs another 8,000 behavioral health workers to meet current demand in that huge county. And the next decade, some concerning other statistics, close to 40% of psychologists will be retiring in the next 5 to 10 years. And by 2028, the state of California anticipates having 11% fewer psychologists, licensed marriage and family therapists, licensed professional clinical counselors, and licensed clinical social workers than needed to meet the demand. Therapist demand is going to be 40% more than the supply by 2028. So, on the employment side, employment for mental health related occupations is projected to grow faster than the average of occupations from 2022 to 2032. And the US Bureau of Labor Statistics projects that employment in clinical social work, in particular in California, will grow by 15 to almost 20% by 2028. So we know that we need to do more work to educate and train and prepare behavioral health, mental health professionals for our area, but also nationally for the world. So I'd like to say a little bit about what role can and do universities play in helping to address these issues. Now, PAU is a fairly unusual institution in that it is dedicated exclusively to educating students, to conducting research, and to providing service in mental and behavioral health. So there are a few other schools such as PAU, but of course, most universities provide a much broader set of majors and degrees that students can can pursue. But at PAU, you have to know that you want to work in this area, in this field, and have an interest in these areas to come to PAU. And so, what's really cool about being at PAU, for me anyway, what I love about it is every student and every faculty member does work that's relevant to the things that we all care about in this in NAMI. So I think that, how is PAU responding to these shortages? Certainly increasing the awareness of these challenges and paying attention to the numbers. Um, I sat along with NAMI representatives and many others on the Santa Clara County Behavioral Health Workforce Advisory Committee, which was really tasked with looking at this issue for Santa Clara County. As I understand it, that report will be going fairly soon to the Board of Supervisors. I'm very hopeful that some of the recommendations in that report, which we haven't seen the final report yet, but will help address some of these issues. I do serve as a member of NAMI's advisory committee, community advisory committee, which I really appreciate, and we do get together and try to brainstorm and think of ways that we can address these issues. I also wanted to mention, this is something that I think people aren't aware of, but there are about 95 private nonprofit universities in California. I think we often think of the UC system and the Cal State system, along with the community colleges, as being the place that meets most of the demand. But actually, what's really interesting is that in the areas of clinical psychology, applied psychology, and counseling, the private nonprofit universities such as PAU produce 90% of all the graduates that come out in the fields of clinical psychology, applied psychology, and mental health and counseling, more broadly, counseling. So I didn't include social work in that because the CSUs play a fantastic and a huge role in social work graduates, particularly our colleagues at San Jose State and at East Bay. But I'm proud to say that because of the demand that we've been seeing, we are adding our first social work program starting this fall. And that was done with state funding that was provided to universities who had not previously offered to social work to help kind of get the program started. So I'm very grateful to HCI for providing some funding for us that allowed us to spur that program. So we actually focus very much on ensuring the retention of students with high quality, culturally humble training, especially in Santa Clara County. We next Saturday, this coming Saturday, is our commencement, and we will graduate almost 300 highly skilled professionals in the fields of clinical psychology, mental health counseling, and the psychology undergrad and master's program. We are the fourth largest producer of mental health practitioners in the independent nonprofit sector in California. And our graduates serve as critical players in addressing the state's mental health workforce issues, particularly well trained. I can brag a little bit about how to serve invaluably in underserved communities and in dual language areas. We do have a specialized clinic where we train our students to work with in Spanish speaking communities where the therapy is done in Spanish, the training is done in Spanish, and the supervision of the student trainees is all done in Spanish. Every year, our students are out in the community training, maybe some of the agencies that you're all familiar with, and they provide over 200,000 hours of clinical service while they are also receiving additional training and supervision in the community. In our own clinics at PAU, we have our in-house training clinics, see around 700 clients a year and do about 45,000 hours of service to those clients. Our doctoral students in clinical psychology have to complete a full year internship, and they are in almost all of the US states doing that internship training. We have students in practicum training sites in 313 unique sites in the region, and an average of almost 500 students participate annually. 240 of those students are in Santa Clara County practicum sites. And so almost 50% of all of our student training placements are within Santa Clara County, which hopefully showcases our commitment to helping address the local mental health needs. So how can NAMI, local government, and other community partners and agencies work with and benefit from what local colleges and universities are doing, and vice versa? How can we benefit from being more engaged in the community? So using PAU as an example, I suggest 4 ways that you can partner with universities. I'm going to focus first on the one that you probably think about, which is the training. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the 5 licensable degrees in behavioral and mental health that are available in California. And then I'll talk about the other 3 ways that we can partner with universities and community can partner in more effective ways. So the 5 disciplines within mental and behavioral health are psychiatry, clinical psychology, LPCCs, licensed professional clinical counselors, marriage and family therapists, and licensed clinical social workers. So I'm going to say a little bit about each of those so that we can just all have the same starting point. Very important to us is that our programs are all accredited by our professions. The 2 psychology programs are accredited by the American Psychological Association, our counseling programs by an organization called KCREP, and our social work program, which is new, is in the process of being accredited by the Social Work Accrediting Agency. And why is that important? It is important because it really is a signal to the level of quality and effective pedagogy, supervision, and areas of study that we are required to provide to our students in order to meet the standards of those accreditors. So it really does mean something to have graduated from an accredited program. One example of that is we are required to have no more than 12 students per each core faculty member in our programs. That ratio can't go above 12 to 1. Now, there are a lot of, and many of our programs, our mental health counseling programs and our social work programs are primarily online programs with in-person residency requirements for several weeks during the program, but those online programs meet rigorous accreditation standards and faculty ratios. So let's think a little bit about the comparison of the five licensable disciplines in the field, just so everybody's kind of on the same page. I meet a lot of people in the community who really don't seem to really appreciate the differences between the various types of mental health professionals. So, of course, starting with psychiatrists, you can get a degree in psychiatry locally at Stanford, at UCSF. UC Davis are the three primary ones. There are others. Psychiatry goes way back into the early 19th century when mental illness began to be seen as a medical condition rather than a moral failing. So prior to that, it was really misunderstood. Of course, Sigmund Freud played an early, some would say unfortunate role in the beginning of it, but it really was thinking about mental health as biological and medical model. And then, of course, as advances in psychopharmacology came about, psychiatrists began to play an even more critical role, focusing on diagnosing and treating, but particularly in the public system and in other systems as well on the medication side of the support and treatment. What makes psychiatrists similar to other disciplines is they do work with other mental health professionals, and many of them have training in therapy and treatment planning. They may provide psychotherapy, though much less common than in the past. I think for many years, psychiatrists primarily provided psychotherapy. Now that is less common. Some still do, some don't. But what makes them different than the others is that they are medical doctors. They do have MD or DO degrees, who then specialize through their residencies in mental health. They are the only mental health professionals who prescribe medication everywhere. There are 5 states that allow clinical psychologists to prescribe medication after some specialized training. California is not one of those, although in my view, it would be a good thing if we could move in that direction. Psychiatrists are also often trained in neurology or psychopharmacology and in understanding the biological basis of mental health. They collaborate with the other disciplines through team in the ideal model through team-led work. They often lead the teams, the integrated behavioral health teams. They, of course, prescribe and manage medications, which many other professionals are then are doing the direct service to the patient. So they really must coordinate, if they're doing it right, coordinate well with the therapists who are working directly with the clients. And they often oversee hospital-based or integrated care settings. You mostly have psychiatrists working with psychologists, but in those settings, psychiatrists are sort of at the top of the team. So clinical psychology is the discipline that PAU originally started out as a professional training school for just clinical psychology. It's really important to understand that all licensed psychologists are psychologists, but not all psychologists are licensed. And what I mean by that is that the title psychologist broadly applies to anyone with a doctoral degree in psychology. My degree, for example, is a degree in psychology, law, and policy. You would not want me treating your patients because I am not trained in clinical psychology. So sometimes you really want to make sure that you are working with a licensed clinical psychologist when you are working with a psychologist. And licensure is required for those who wish to practice independently in clinical settings. So this route includes specialized clinical training, supervised experience, licensing exams, it's a rigorous 5, 6, 7 year process that our students have to go through to the point where they are fully educated, graduated, and licensed psychologists. So it is a rigorous, it's much more like medical school in that sense. It is often anywhere from 5 to 7, even to 8 years, depending on their specialty area, before they are fully licensed clinical psychologists. And psychology didn't emerge until the late 19th century. And today, psychologists focus not just in clinical areas, but cognition, behavior, emotion, industrial organizational, a lot of different areas in both research and clinical practice. What makes clinical psychologists similar to others is they are well trained to provide psychotherapy. They are exceedingly well trained to do assessments, psychological assessments, and they work in clinical, school, hospital, and private practice settings. Sadly, I think fewer clinical psychologists are in the public behavioral health system than used to be, and that's something we could talk more about why that might make a difference. Clinical psychology psychologists do not have a medical degree. They hold either a PhD or a PsyD. PsyD is a more practice-oriented degree. The PhD is a more research-oriented degree. They tend to specialize in psychological testing and assessment. Our students get many, many hours of training in supervised assessment and testing. They provide the assessments, they get supervised in it, they redo them, they have to learn how to write the reports. It's very, very rigorous. And they use evidence-based therapy approaches like cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, etc. That is what our training provides them. They work with teams, with psychiatrists, obviously, for medication management. They refer patients to psychiatrists for medication. They partner often with other therapists and social workers to enhance treatment plans by getting resources in the community. All right, the third degree I'm going to talk about is the Licensed Professional Clinical Counselors, the LPCCs. This is a degree that is newer in the state of California. It's been around the rest of the country for longer. So I often hear people confusing the LPCCs with the marriage and family therapists. There are a lot of overlap, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but they are two different licensed degrees. Counseling as a profession really didn't come into being until last century, the mid 20th century. And it was really influenced by Carl Rogers. Some of you may know about Carl Rogers' amazing client-centered therapy work. It was also driven by the vocational guidance movement and the community mental health focus. So LPCCs, I've got a cough, so apologize. Focus on personal development, on wellness, on life transitions, on positive mental health, relational issues, as well as other mental health issues. So they became a licensed, distinct profession not until the late 20th century. All 50 states now have licensure for mental health counselors. Modalities that they use include brief counseling, career counseling, and evidence-based approaches in other areas. What makes them similar to other disciplines is they are very well trained in individual and group therapy. Our students have to all be trained in both individual and group therapy. Again, training being not just what they learn in the classroom, but in training settings with supervision for, I think it's 3,000 hours by the time they are fully licensed. So very intense training and supervision. They also use evidence-based approaches, as do clinical psychologists, and they address the range of mental health issues, such as anxiety, depression, grief, and other areas. What makes them different and what really led the field to evolve as its own discipline, really more of a focus on wellness, on coping skills, on personal growth. And it has always, as a field, been grounded in a multicultural and social justice lens. So sometimes distinguished depending on the program that you go to, you can find different characteristics, but that is the way that counseling evolved as its own discipline. They do not specialize in psychological testing or assessment, although they do get some training in assessment, and they do not specialize in family systems therapy, although they often can do some training in working with families. So it's a little confusing, but that's not their primary training. They typically work in outpatient school and community settings. They work alongside school counselors in school settings. School counseling is its own separate um, discipline, separate from licensed professional clinical counselors, but often interchange in terms of the work. What's helpful to understand is people may get the basic training in one or the other, and then obtain additional training to make sure that they are ready to work in the specific setting that they're being asked to work in. Then we have the fourth area is a marriage and family therapist. Now, this has dominated the master's level counseling profession in the state of California. The MFT degree was around for a long, long time before the LPCC. So oftentimes I hear people talking about MFTs, and they really mean LPCCs and MFTs. So there are two different degrees. They have a lot of overlap, so I understand that, but it's important to understand the licensing is separate and requires different set of courses and different sets of experience. So the MFT degree came about in the 1950s, so it's really an older degree than the LPCC, and it really grew out of family systems theory, a lot of which was done here in California, which is why it was such a prominent degree here. And it was developed to address mental health issues, but within the context of relationships and family dynamics. I think it has, sometimes it's still, the students who really want to do that work get their MFT, but a lot of times I think there's sort of overlap in the two. But in the original degree was really designed to focus on relationships and family dynamics. And for many of our students who want to do that work, that's the degree that they choose. They can provide individual therapy. They are trained to do individual therapy, but the focus is supposed to be on systems and families. They also use evidence-based therapies. They do use a systems approach, which is a different approach than an individual therapy approach. And I think one of the challenges we face in our system, especially in perhaps our public behavioral health system, but really in all of our health systems, is finding coverage for family systems work is very challenging. And my own feeling is that if we had more of that, that it would be a better use of resources than we are now using. But our students are trained in this area, and many of them want to work with families and relationships. Finally, we come to licensed clinical social workers. Now, social work is a broad field, and there are many kinds of social workers. So many of you have probably worked with multiple types of social workers: school social workers, community social workers. There's some specialized in forensic work who work with people in jails and prisons. So there's many areas, but the licensed clinical social worker is really designed to be a behavioral health focused profession. California was actually the first state to license social work. So, and that was in 1967, which really made clinical social work a recognized profession. So California was kind of ahead of the curve in this area. What makes licensed clinical social workers similar to other disciplines? They do provide direct practice, providing evidence-based interventions. They do provide DSM diagnoses. They do the same as counselors and psychologists in that sense. They can be in private practice. But what makes them different is that they're always accompanied, if they're providing individual or family behavioral health intervention, it's really accompanied with accessing community-based support. It's a client empowerment and advocacy approach is how they are trained in the field of social work. So I'm sure many of you have worked with wonderful social workers who really help, sort of access the array of services that might be available in the communities. They are the profession of choice for working in the publicly funded behavioral health system. I think it's many of the folks who work in public behavioral health are licensed clinical social workers. Um, and they do initiate and are known as participating in more organizational and community change initiatives that advanced equity. It's very much a part of their training, and I could see that as we were developing our program, how much that was sort of built into the curriculum and into the professional development work that we will be doing with our students. Um, and they are really trained to work in community settings on the ground, not as much in clinics. So they of course do work in different settings, but really the idea was for the LCSWs to be in the community settings, to be available in the community, to know the resources that are out there, to work with the various providers. Of course, they do. How do they collaborate with others? They participate in interdisciplinary teams. In the best of worlds, they are working in integrated teams, all of these various professionals. And they do have an important role in integrated behavioral health because they really provide the assessment and treatment at the mild to moderate level and make those important linkages to the community. So I want to just say a word about the peer mentors and peer support specialist certification, which I know has been so important to NAMI. It's important to understand it is not a licensable degree, right? This is not it's not, but you can be certified thanks to former Senator Bell, longtime NAMI member, and a lot of work by NAMI and others. Thanks to that legislation enacted in 2020, there is a statewide certification program for peer support specialists, and maybe many of you have participated in that program. The legislation was intended very helpfully to standardize the training, supervision, provide ethical guidelines for how individuals with lived experience in mental health or substance abuse recovery could provide peer support to their peers. So obviously to become certified, it's a very rigorous 80-hour training program, and it covers 17 core competencies. The individuals have to pass an exam, and then the certification is good for 2 years and can be renewed. So it's not a licensed profession in the way that the other five are in terms of like being able to practice independently as clinicians, but it's a very important support to the rest of the system. It's probably maybe the most important connection that people often have in their recovery journeys. So what makes them similar to other mental health or behavioral health disciplines is they are supporting individuals working toward wellness. They establish professional relationships grounded in trust and confidentiality through an ethical framework. They help clients set goals, smart goals that many of you are familiar with. And they also help individuals find additional support and resources, maybe help them find a social worker who can guide them toward additional resources. What makes them different, just sort of finish this comparison, they do not have a clinical role. They do not diagnose or treat or provide therapy. The support is grounded in lived experience, not in the formal training and licensure of a behavioral health field. It's mutuality and shared experience, which builds connection, which is so critically important for people to have. It also, these folks really encourage self-advocacy, which I think is a big part of what NAMI does so well, is for people to advocate on behalf of themselves and others to change policies like this one that was took Senator Bell many, many years to get this passed, and others that others are working on. So very, very important addition to the overall supports provided in the system. So just to sort of sum up, each profession brings a fairly distinct perspective with particular curriculum, particular training experiences. Kind of the content varies, the competencies vary depending on the area, but they together, if it was all working beautifully, would provide a comprehensive multidisciplinary mental health care where psychiatrists diagnose and prescribe medication for the biological aspects, clinical psychologists could conduct the assessments and provide the in-depth therapy for people who need maybe longer term care. The LPCCs focus on individual counseling, mental wellness, positive psychology, life transition. The MFTs specialize in family and relationship dynamics, and the licensed clinical social workers integrate the therapy with social services and case management. By working together, these professionals can ensure holistic care that address the biological, psychological, social, and relational aspects of mental health. That's in an ideal world. I think many of us who've been involved in this system for many years know that isn't always the way it works. And yes, there are tensions among the disciplines, primarily due to the differences in training, scope of practice, professional identity, and reimbursement structures. So some of those differences are psychiatrists, as medical doctors, often assert their authority as the head of the team over diagnosis and treatment, while psychologists who have had just as many years of training often argue for greater autonomy, especially in states where they believe they could be prescribing. So there's a sort of tension between the medical psychiatry model and the clinical PhD doctoral PsyD clinical psychology model. Not when it's working well, but when it's not. And then similarly, psychologists who are at the doctoral level and the rest of the licensed professional clinical counselors, licensed clinical social workers, and MFTs are master's level licensed clinicians. Psychologists have specialized training in assessment and research and have had many more years of training in those areas. And sometimes that creates friction with other therapy-based disciplines that have taken a slightly different approach. So again, not if it's working well, they work well as a team, but there can sometimes be distinctions based on that. Similarly, with MFTs and LPCCs, I often hear people talking about them interchangeably. It's understandable because much of the training is the same, but if they were true to the license degree that they were licensed for, there should be more of a distinction than there is. And then I think sometimes the licensed clinical social workers are asked to do more of the individual therapy and other things as opposed to always using the skills that they have really been trained in to engage in the community resource allocation and relationships with the community and advocacy. So, this is not a perfect world, but I hope hopefully it's helpful to sort of think about these different things. I wanted to just say a little bit about in my dreams. I have this dream where there's much more interdisciplinary education. So one of the things I like about PAU is that all of our students are exposed to the training and the students in these and the faculty in these other areas. So they get a very good sense of the various disciplines and how they fit into the overall system. But we generally need more interdisciplinary education, even between the disciplines, to understand what the scope of practice is for the other disciplines. It would be helpful if there were more clearly defined roles so that people knew who to hire which degree to be looking for which types of services. It gets a little bit muddled, and I don't think that that's helpful. And then I would love to see us advocating for more integrated care. I have this fantasy of PAU being able to send a team of a social work student, a counseling student, and a psychology student to a practicum site as a team where their supervision would be an integrated team approach. I think that would be, if I had in my pie in the sky dream world, that's what I would like to see. Professionals who address mental health and behavioral health from multiple angles working together to think about holistic care. I just want to say one more thing about so beyond diagnosis, how do we move from that to true healing? So, unlike programs that focus solely on psychiatry or medication, this broader approach that emphasizes evidence-based therapy, client empowerment, social determinants of health, shaping well-rounded behavioral health professionals would, I think, benefit the entire system. And I hope that we at PAU are contributing to that vision. So I'm going to pause a minute. And I'm just going to say I have a couple more things, but I just want to pause and just see that was a lot. So just see if there are any questions up to this point, and then I have a few more things to say at the end.
Yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand or you can enter in the chat. And I just wanted to add just like the peer support training. We have a program here at NAMI, Santa Clara County called Community Peer Program, where we match participants with a mentor who are trained by us. So they do go through a training at NAMI and we set SMART goals and the match lasts for about 4 months.
Yes, no,
That's
I'm
something that we developed here at our affiliate.
very proud of that
Yeah.
program. So let me just say a few. So I mentioned at the beginning, I was going to talk about 4 ways that I thought organizations like ours, universities could work better with community agencies, with NAMI, with other providers. How could we work better to just see how we fit into the broader picture? So I've already talked about the professional training, right? The license degrees, but we also provide professional training to those who are already in the field. So I think universities play an important role for continuing education, for additional specialized training. People sometimes get out into the field and find themselves, let's say, working primarily in a jail setting, and they didn't have enough training in their program to really understand the dynamics of that. So they could come back to PAU as a professional for professional training, and other universities as well, to get professional training once they're already licensed, to kind of get more specialized training in the areas of focus. Another example I often use is we have students who've become very interested in working in pediatric psychology, and that is not an area you get one course in your training. So you really need additional training when you get out into the field. So I think universities can be critical partners in not just supporting those who are already in the field, but potentially supporting agencies that might say, I'd like our whole staff to be better trained in X in this area. So I think that's a good way for universities to partner. Another way that we partner, and some of you may be aware of this, is our faculty and students conduct research all the time. We have almost 100 psychology doctoral students graduating on Saturday. They have all done dissertations, actively researched dissertations. And most of that work is important applied behavioral health research, a lot of which focuses on practice and teaching and policy. And that work is enriched when we work with community partners, and we can work when our faculty and students can actually do work that matters in the community. So the fourth way that we can work together is through partnerships. So we can partner with external entities to provide training, to provide services. So right now, for example, we're working with San Mateo County to provide additional support to some of their unhoused people who are not able to get to particular centers. So we're actually putting a team together with students and supervision to provide support. So we can work in partnership. We did some wonderful work with Hidden Villa to train their camp counselors in recognizing signs and symptoms of mental health distress and things along those lines. And then advocacy. I mean, what NAMI is is so good at. Working together, we can make a more powerful impact on advocacy. We have students who are interested in policy. We have data that may support things that you're working on. Ensure students from all communities have the chance to pursue careers in behavioral health. So I think there's a lot of work we could be doing. We do a lot of work already together, but I think we could even do more. I do want to mention that the Association of Independent California Colleges and Universities, which PAU is very active member of, because of a few of our universities which are focusing in the areas of behavioral health, AICCU is in Sacramento now tracking any legislation that focuses on behavioral health and training. So we have really good attention being paid at the state level in these areas now. So I just want to end by saying, some of you know this, who you know why I've been involved, but for many years, my late husband and I were the primary caregiver for my beloved sister-in-law, who just turned 80 and who deals with schizoaffective disorder, depression, and bipolar concern. Her husband also has deals with schizophrenia. And when we found at the time in Tucson, the Alliance for the Mentally Ill of Southern Arizona, which was the local NAMI chapter, it was literally life-changing. I mean, I know many of you on this screen have this experience. My husband was a public defender specializing in working with clients with mental illness. I was in a doctoral program in psychology, and we still didn't know what we should be doing to support our beloved family member, and we could not have been better situated. And yet, finding care, finding the right care, knowing who to talk to, NAMI was absolutely essential to our survival. And I just want to say now, as the president of a small nonprofit university that specializes in this area, I finally feel like I have a path to making a difference in the lives of families. And so many of our students have family members themselves who have challenges with behavioral health, and that is what brings them to us and why they want to serve in this important field. So it's very, very much an honor for me to talk to you because NAMI has been essential to my life for so many years, and I love that we've been able to work together. So I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you. I think you're muted, my dear.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. I do see a question here. Is there any ways of expanding these programs to serve individuals who are homeless or underserved communities, or creating a program to educate public officials on the realities of behavioral health and how to better understand mental health?
I mean, I think that is absolutely essential. I do think that was part of the goal for the Behavioral Health Workforce Advisory Council, and I'm hoping that one of the recommendations, at least coming out of that, is focused on public education and also getting into the schools. You know, if you listen to over the last few years, you thought you have to become an engineer, right? STEM, everybody in high school is told they have to do STEM. Well, what if we had the opportunity to talk with them about careers in behavioral and mental health and really show them paths to fulfilling careers where you can really truly make a difference in people's lives? So I think public education is really important, and we do have a YouTube channel with some information that's available for free to people. But I also think, NAMI has amazing education programs as well. But I think getting into the schools and educating the public behavioral health workers themselves. I think sometimes when I talk to the county folks, or to others, I'm not always sure they understand all the distinctions I talked about tonight and sort of how to think about, who to hire for what purposes and how to make the best use of the training that our students and others receive. So yeah, I think there's big room for more public education for sure.
The other question is, if I wish to work with people who have bipolar, schizophrenia, or other psychosis, in which program should I pursue a master's degree, not a PhD?
If you don't want to do a doctoral degree, I think what I would say is talk to various programs in either mental health counseling or licensed clinical social work. I think in general, I would say the mental health counseling masters is probably the best path for that particular population, just because I think you would get the strongest training in the individual therapy and use of assessments and things along those lines. But, ask these questions to the admissions folks at various universities, and because that's a really good question. The challenge, I'll tell you, and this is what frustrates me a little bit um, our students often do their training in the VA system or at in the sometimes at some of the psychiatry clinics because it is actually challenging, or in, I'm sorry, jail and prison settings, because it is challenging to get good supervised training in working with serious mental illness. So a lot of the community agencies that accept trainees aren't necessarily working with these populations. So I think there's some work that could be done there um, to provide more opportunities for training with work with these important populations. I particularly think that's true in the jail setting. Yeah.
Thank you. There's a comment. I appreciate your dedication and presentation you gave today. I found it very helpful to understand the 5 different areas of work Maureen described. We have had a tough time trying to get the right help for a loved one. So this is great. Thank you so much
So
for saying
glad.
this. I
I'm
think this was
happy to
really
follow
helpful.
up if anybody wants more information. I think, maybe I've been thinking, wondering about doing this presentation at, at some county function or something.
Yeah, no, I think this is great. And the great thing is that we've recorded this live, and anyone who wants to go back and watch it, students or prospective students or
Awesome.
family members, I think they can always go back. Are there any other questions before we end the session? If anyone has a question, either you can raise your hand or just put it in the chat.
And you can always go to
That's right.
www.paloaltou.edu.
That's right. Okay, doesn't look like we have any other questions
Can I just say one
here.
more thing, Ravina?
Yeah,
So, because I see you're 50 behind you, this was NAMI's 50th year, and then this coming year is PAU's 50th
that's
anniversary.
great.
Yes,
Congratulations.
yes. So
That's amazing.
look out
So
for that.
around the same time. Um, but thank you so much. I know you have a cough and not feeling the best, but we really, really appreciate the presentation that you gave and such important information. I think this is so helpful for our future leaders and the future people who are going to help us and support us. And so really appreciate it, Maureen, and thank you again. We do have some thank you messages as well. And
I
the
just put the website in there. Like the first one is not is misspelled. The second one is
second
correct.
one is correct. It's Palo Alto
Palo
OU
Alto U, Palo Alto
at
University, Palo
dot
Alto
edu.
U.edu.
Yeah. So thank
Great.
you. Then thank you
Thank
everyone
you.
for joining us tonight. And happy Tuesday. And so yeah, and
Thank you,
see you
everybody.
again. And yeah, thank you.